I share with you now a reading, also by Danaan Perry, The Parable of the Trapeze. Sometimes I feel that my life is a series of trapeze swings. I'm either hanging on to a trapeze bar swinging along, or for a few moments in my life, I'm hurling across space in between trapeze bars. Most of the time, I spend my life hanging on for dear life to my trapeze bar of the moment. It carries me along at a certain steady rate of swing, and I have a feeling that I'm in control of my life. I know most of the right questions and even some of the answers. But every once in a while, as I'm merrily, or even not so merrily, swinging along, I look out ahead of me into the distance, and what do I see? Another trapeze bar swinging toward me. It's empty, and I know in that place in me that knows that this trapeze bar has my name on it. It is my next step, my growth, my aliveness coming to get me. In my heart of hearts, I know that for me to grow, I must release my grip on this present, well-known bar and move to the new one. Each time it happens to me, I hope, no, I pray, that I won't have to let go of my old bar completely before I grab the new one. But in my knowing place, I know that I must totally release my grasp on my own bar, and for some moment in time, I must hurtle across space before I can grab onto the new bar. Each time I am filled with terror. It doesn't matter that in all my previous hurdles across the void of unknowing, I have always made it. I am each time afraid that I will miss, that I will be crushed on unseen rocks in the bottomless chasm between bars. I do it anyway. Perhaps this is the essence of what the mystics call the faith experience. No guarantees, no net, no insurance policy, but you do it anyway because somehow to keep hanging on to that old bar is no longer in the list of alternatives. So for an eternity that can last a microsecond or 1,000 lifetimes, I soar across the dark void of the past is gone, the future is not yet here. It's called transition. I have come to believe that this transition is the only place that real change occurs. I mean real change, not the pseudo change that only lasts until the next time my old buttons get punched. I have noticed that in our culture, this transition zone is looked upon as a no thing, a no place between places. Sure, the old trapeze bar was real, and that new one coming toward me, I hope that's real too. But the void in between, is that just a scary, confusing, disorienting nowhere that must be gotten through as fast and as unconsciously as possible? No. What a wasted opportunity that would be. I have a sneaking suspicion that the transition zone is the only real thing, and the bars are illusions we dream up to avoid the void where the real change, the real growth occurs for us. Whether or not my hunch is true, it remains that the transition zones in our lives are incredibly rich places. They should be honored, even savored. Yes, with all the pain and fear and feelings of being out of control that can, but not necessarily, accompany transitions, they are still the most alive, most growth-filled, passionate, expansive moments in our lives. So transformation of fear may have nothing to do with making fear go away, but rather with giving ourselves permission to hang out in that transition between trapezes. Transforming our need to grab that new bar, any bar, is allowing ourselves to dwell in the only place where change really happens. It can be terrifying. It can also be enlightening in the true sense of the word. Hurtling through the void, we just may learn how to fly.
So I haven't ever been on a trapeze myself. Maybe someday. Yeah. But I have seen enough trapeze artists in action that Danaan Perry's metaphor is vivid in my mind. And that invitation to hang out in the often terrifying space between bars, hurtling through the void, as he says, it's an evocative image. It brings to mind for me a memory of being on a ropes course a few years ago. Some of you know this story already. I love those adventure parks, especially the zip lines. And I've been invigorated when I've visited and discovered there's something I can do that at first looked impossible. But also, I can't do everything. And on this particular day, we'd been out there long enough that my body was really tired. And maybe I should have taken a break instead of doing one more course with the kids. But there I was, up in the trees, about 30 feet off the ground. And I started to cross on an obstacle that I realized I just could not do. Neither my arms nor my legs could reach what needed to be reached. And this was not a leaping situation. I felt stuck. I was suddenly very afraid, and I got quite panicky as I looked across the chasm to that seemingly impossible to reach platform that was my intended destination on the other side. Fortunately, I was not there alone, and 11-year-old Sarah behind me registered my panic, made her way to the platform where I was, and showed me how I could simply attach my thingamajigger to the safety line and cross that way without navigating the tricky obstacle at all. So I did it. I got across to the next side. And then I promptly used one of those early exit ladders to make my way to the ground, where I gave my body some needed rest. The thing I wrote about this a few years ago was titled, "Early Exits May Improve Adventures." As in so many of life's situations, I was quite grateful not to be alone up there that day. We just heard from Alex in his writing about that trapeze bar swinging toward him. Danaan Perry says, "I know in that place in me that knows that this new trapeze bar has my name on it. It is my next step, my growth, my aliveness coming to me. In my heart of hearts, I know that for me to grow, I must release my grip on this present, well-known bar and move to the new one." He goes on to say, the transition zones in our lives are incredibly rich places. They should be honored, even savored, with all the pain and fear and feelings of being out of control that can, but not necessarily, accompany transitions. They are still the most alive, most growth-filled, passionate, expansive moments in our lives. In the 6 weeks since I announced that I would leave from UUCC at the end of June, I've heard a variety of responses to the news of this imminent change. Some fear and worry about what the future holds for UUCC, some sadness, some relief, some excitement. Regardless of an individual's feelings about it, we know it's a big change after 21 years of ministry together. And for some among us, there may be moments of feeling out of control, hurtling through space across whatever void we have to cross. But mostly that's not what I'm hearing from you. Mostly I'm hearing that you feel grounded and capable and adequately equipped for this change. I am hopeful that this time of transition is and will continue to be an incredibly rich place, a time to be honored and savored, as Danaan Perry says. And like my day on that ropes course, none of us is alone in it. And this UUCC ministerial transition isn't the only threshold at which any of us currently resides. It's not even the only threshold at which UUCC currently resides. For the congregation, there's a renewed identity and mission and purpose that is in formation. This is why you need to take that end survey. A pledge drive being launched this week that asks the community lovingly and generously to invest itself in the future of the institution's shared ministries. There are children graduating from high school and launching into their more independent lives. There are marriages that may be dissolving. There are families relocating their homes across countries and oceans. There are changes in jobs, changes in fitness routines, changes in physical capacity, changes in spiritual practices. We're facing choices about becoming sober, about forgiveness, about seeking therapy, about letting go of resentments, about taking action alongside neighbors who are asking for our solidarity. Each one of these is a threshold, a trapeze bar swinging one's way, maybe. And in each case, we have the option of staying where we are, clinging to what's familiar, even if it is no longer serving us well, or to take the risk of letting go to experience what's on the other side. To change, writes John O'Donohue, is one of the great dreams of every heart. To change the limitations, the sameness, the banality, or the pain. But change, he says, is difficult for us. So often we opt to continue to the old pattern rather than risking the danger of difference. We are also often surprised by change that seems to arrive out of nowhere. We find ourselves crossing some new threshold we had never anticipated. And like spring, secretly at work within the heart of winter, below the surface of our lives, huge changes are in fermentation. We never suspect a thing. Then, when the grip of some long-enduring winter mentality begins to loosen, we find ourselves vulnerable to a flourish of possibility. Vulnerable to a flourish of possibility. And we are suddenly negotiating the challenge of a threshold. There are no guarantees that crossing a threshold is going to work out. No promises that what's on the other side of the door, the transition, the threshold will be better than what we have now. But one of the core values we share as Unitarian Universalists is a commitment to spiritual growth, an investment in meaning-making. Social scientists tell us that humans instinctively cling to that which is familiar, even if it's painful, unhealthy, meaningless, instead of seeking out that which is new. Meanwhile, brain scientists tell us that our brains are hungry for new things, that to keep our brains healthy, we need to feed them new information and new experiences. So we know that whatever the threshold at which we stand, there is a high likelihood that crossing it will bring growth. Especially if that decision to cross is not a careless decision, but as Danaan Perry says, in my heart of hearts, I know that for me to grow, I must release my grip on this present, well-known bar and move to the new one. And we know that the in-between time is itself potentially rich with meaning, as we stretch and explore and question and seek information in navigating our way across. Making changes forces our attention to expand beyond the routine to which we've become accustomed. We open ourselves to new perspectives and deeper learning, different ways of being. and we don't have to do it alone. About a year ago, as we were preparing for some sabbatical time apart, I told the congregation I was expecting the sabbatical to be a time of discernment for me. Discernment. I knew there were questions swirling already, not only about when it would be time to leave from this ministry, but also about what my vocational life might look like after parish ministry, regardless of when that timing was. So one of the things I did in last spring was a clearness gathering in the style of Parker Palmer and the Quaker tradition of clearness committees. During that gathering, I came to imagine that I was standing on the edge of a canyon. I could tell, I was close enough to the edge that I could see that on the other side there was something I wanted to reach, even though it wasn't clearly visible to me. I also could tell that I would need a bridge or a flight vehicle of some kind to get across. And those resources were not in sight yet. So I would need to stay on this side for a while. Perhaps I could wander a bit, seek advice from others on this side of the canyon, see who might have crossed before, ask how they did it, encounter those who could direct me to a bridge or a helicopter or a hippogriff, anything to help me get across. And that's what I've been doing over the course of the year since then, still on this side of the canyon, still unsure what's on the other side, but feeling enriched simply by engaging with you and others who've traveled paths different than I have. And I'm embracing this gift, and it is a gift that I'm fortunate to have been given, of unrushed, emergent time that we're all sharing together, still in relationship. I'm grateful not to be alone. As you reflect on this moment in your life, whether it's in relation to UUCC or something separate from that relationship, consider this invitation from John O'Donohue. At any time, you can ask yourself, at which threshold am I now standing? At this time in my life, what am I leaving? Where am I about to enter? What is preventing me from crossing my next threshold? What gift could enable me to do it? A threshold, he says, is not a simple boundary. It is a frontier that divides two different territories, rhythms, and atmospheres. Indeed, it is a lovely testimony to the fullness and integrity of an experience or stage of life that it intensifies toward the end into a real frontier that cannot be crossed without the heart being passionately engaged and woken up. At this threshold, a great complexity of emotion comes alive. Confusion, fear, excitement, sadness, hope. This is one of the reasons such vital crossings were always clothed in ritual. It is wise in your own life to be able to recognize and acknowledge the key thresholds, to take your time, to feel all the varieties of presence that accrue there, to listen inward with complete attention until you hear the inner voice calling you forward. The time has come to cross. In these next 4 months together, as we are at a threshold, and then also in the time that will follow, I hope we're all able to experience those varieties of presence and to give adequate attention to that voice calling us forward, to accept the invitation to cross the threshold, go through the door, grab the other trapeze bar, whichever metaphor works best for you. and to enter the frontier. So may it be.